You are walking along a riverbank 100,000 years ago. Dusk is settling in. Something shifts in the reeds behind you. You spin around and lock eyes with a scimitar-toothed cat, easily double the size of any big cat alive today. 600 pounds of muscle and curved blade-like teeth. It is staring straight at you. No gun, no spear, not even a decent rock in your hand. Your teeth are useless for this. Your nails cannot cut skin. You cannot outrun it. You cannot outclimb it. You cannot win a fight against it. So how are you even alive right now? How did your ancestors make it through an age when almost everything bigger than a dog was built to kill them? It is worth sitting with that question for a moment before jumping to the answer. Because the honest, uncomfortable truth is that nothing about our raw physical package explains our survival at all. Let's start with what was actually hunting us. In the 1920s, the anatomist Raymond Dart examined a small skull recovered from a limestone quarry in southern Africa, belonging to a young, early human ancestor, likely no older than 3 or 4. Punched clean through both eye sockets were two matching puncture marks, spaced exactly like the lower canines of a large eagle capable of carrying off small prey. This was not an accident. This child had been hunted, killed, and carried off as food, likely into a nest or den, the way a modern eagle handles a monkey or a small antelope today. For millions of years, humans were not the predator in the story. We were the meal, and the animals hunting us were not simply dangerous. They were apex specialists that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of killing large mammals, each one arriving with its own specialized toolkit built by natural selection specifically for taking down something roughly our size. Start with the scimitar-toothed cat, a real predator known to paleontologists as Homo therium, built with long, serrated canines and powerful forelimbs suited for wrestling down prey rather than chasing it. It rarely ran anything down. It waited in cover near a water source and closed the distance in a short, explosive burst, delivering a single deep bite that ended things almost instantly. It was not the only nightmare on the landscape. There was also the short-faced bear, a genuine hypercarnivore rather than the opportunistic omnivore most modern bears are. Standing well over 11 feet tall on its hind legs, weighing close to 2,000 pounds, and built with unusually long legs for sustained running rather than lumbering, it ate almost nothing but meat, and it could cover ground at speeds that would leave a person with no chance whatsoever. Then there were the giant hyenas, considerably larger and more powerfully built than the hyenas alive today, capable of generating bite forces well over 1,000 pounds per square inch, more than 6 times what a human jaw can produce, easily crushing bone to reach the marrow inside. They hunted in coordinated packs, often at night, exactly when early humans could see the least, and their dens have turned up littered with the chewed, splintered remains of prey animals many times their own size, including bones stripped down more thoroughly than almost any modern scavenger manages today. Add to that dire wolves running in packs several dozen strong, American lions considerably larger than the lions of modern Africa, giant cheetahs built for speed on open plains, and enormous, flightless terror birds standing taller than a person, with hooked beaks strong enough to crack open a skull in a single strike. In parts of the world with dense forest cover, there were leopards perfectly adapted to snatch prey out of trees at night, and crocodilian ambush predators lurking at the exact watering holes early humans had no real choice but to visit every single day. There was no safe hour and no safe terrain. Water, shade, and open ground were all claimed by something with better weapons than we had. Wherever early humans went, something on that landscape was actively trying to eat them. Here is the part that should genuinely humble you. A chimpanzee, our closest living relative, is roughly 3 times stronger than an average adult human pound for pound. Chimpanzees have real fangs. They can scale 30 feet of tree trunk in a matter of seconds. And chimpanzees still get killed by leopards on a regular basis. A chimpanzee in a straight physical contest would tear a grown man apart without much effort. And unlike us, chimpanzees still retain a real set of canine teeth built for exactly that kind of confrontation. Humans, by comparison, were slower than chimpanzees and weaker than chimpanzees. Our night vision was poor. Our sense of smell was unremarkable at best. Our hearing gave us no real edge. We stood upright, which made us visible from a considerable distance across open ground, and our infants were essentially helpless, unable to walk for roughly a full year, and prone to crying at exactly the wrong moments. By every reasonable biological measure, our species should have been wiped out within a relatively short stretch of time. It was not. Every single predator on that list is now extinct. We are still here. Not because any one of us was individually tougher, faster, or better armed than the animals hunting us, but because of what our species figured out how to do collectively. So, what actually happened? The first real weapon was fire. At a site called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, archaeologists uncovered burned bone fragments, ash deposits, and hearth structures dating back roughly 1 million years, among the earliest solid evidence of controlled fire use anywhere on the planet. Fire changed the entire equation. A burning fire creates an invisible safety perimeter roughly 30 feet across that most predators will not cross. A hardwired avoidance response that still shows up in wild lions today, and one that field researchers still rely on deliberately whenever they need to keep large predators away from a camp overnight without any modern fencing available. Fire gave early humans usable light after sunset, warmth their bare, thin-furred bodies genuinely needed, and something arguably more valuable than either: extra hours. Before fire, nightfall meant finding shelter and staying completely motionless until sunrise. After fire, a group gained several additional hours every single night to make tools, plan ahead, and simply talk to one another. Fire also unlocked cooking, and cooked meat delivers dramatically more usable calories while requiring far less digestive effort than raw meat. More available calories eventually supported the growth of a larger, more energy-hungry brain, and a larger brain meant sharper problem solving exactly when it mattered most. Fire also changed the social structure of the group itself. Sitting together around a shared flame after dark, with predators genuinely kept at bay by the light, gave early humans a nightly window for exactly the kind of extended face-to-face conversation that daytime survival tasks never allowed for. A detail archaeologists increasingly think mattered just as much as the physical protection fire provided. Fire alone was not enough. The second weapon was endurance. Humans are genuinely poor sprinters. A pursuing predator, like the scimitar-toothed cat, could reach speeds no human has ever come close to matching, even briefly. What no predator on that entire list could do, though, was keep moving for hour after hour in open heat. Humans developed something called persistence hunting. Instead of chasing an animal at full speed, you track it at a steady jog, just fast enough to keep it moving and never letting it fully recover. You follow it for hours at a stretch. The animal sprints, stops to cool down, gets pushed into moving again, and cannot properly regulate its body temperature while constantly on the move the way a human body can through sweating. Eventually, it collapses from heat exhaustion, and a person simply walks up and finishes the job with a rock or a sharpened stick. Humans carry an extraordinary density of sweat glands compared to almost any other mammal on the planet, which is precisely what makes this strategy possible. No other species on Earth can reliably run an animal into the ground through sheer heat management the way we can. A healthy adult in reasonable condition can sustain a submaximal jog for the better part of a day, something almost no four-legged mammal of comparable size can match once ambient temperature climbs, which meant the hottest, most exposed hours of the day, once genuinely dangerous for a soft-skinned primate, gradually became our single greatest hunting advantage instead of our greatest weakness. The third weapon was pattern recognition. The human brain is built to notice patterns almost obsessively. A bent blade of grass means something recently walked through here. Disturbed soil means something dug at this exact spot. The shape and depth of a print reveals the species, its size, and roughly how long ago it passed. Early humans eventually turned that same tracking instinct back onto the predators hunting them. They learned that scimitar-toothed cats favored ambush spots near water at dusk. They learned cave lions avoided burning fires almost without exception. They learned which bears hunted alone and defended fixed territory. All of that knowledge was observed, remembered, taught to the next generation, and compounded further with every generation that followed. A single skilled tracker could look at a faint depression in dry mud and correctly estimate not just which predator had passed through, but roughly its size, its health, and how recently it had moved on, information that could mean the difference between a safe evening and a fatal one for an entire group, relying on that single reed of the ground. But the real weapon, the one that mattered most, was each other. At a site called Dmanisi in the country of Georgia, researchers recovered a skull belonging to an early human ancestor who had lost every single tooth years before dying, dated to roughly 1.8 million years ago. Without teeth, chewing raw meat or tough plant matter becomes essentially impossible. This individual survived for a meaningful stretch of time after losing that ability entirely, which means someone else was preparing food soft enough to eat, or feeding them directly. No predator on that earlier list does anything remotely like this. A toothless lion simply dies. A toothless human, it turns out, got taken care of. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, researchers uncovered a Neanderthal skeleton dated to roughly 60,000 years ago, showing a healed, broken arm, blindness in one eye, and advanced arthritis, having lived to an age considered genuinely old for the time. This person could not have hunted or fought effectively for years, and his group kept him alive regardless, feeding him, protecting him, and likely relying on him for exactly the kind of accumulated tracking and predator knowledge described a moment ago, knowledge that only became more valuable the longer he survived to pass it along. This is the real dividing line. Humans did not merely cooperate, they cared. And their group hunting was never pure instinct the way it is for wolves. It was coordinated strategy. Drive the animal toward a natural drop-off. Position people waiting below with sharpened weapons. Cut off every possible escape route in advance. Complex verbal language let groups plan multi-step ambushes ahead of time, something raw instinct alone could never manage. And then came the throw. Somewhere around 380,000 years ago, wooden throwing spears recovered from a site in Germany show clear evidence of deliberate aerodynamic shaping, weighted and balanced specifically to fly true across real distance. Throwing a projectile with real force and accuracy turns out to require an extremely specific piece of anatomy, an elastic, energy-storing shoulder joint that most primates, including chimpanzees, simply do not have. Human shoulders can store and release enormous rotational energy in a fraction of a second, which is exactly why a trained thrower can launch a spear hard enough to seriously wound something many times their own size from a completely safe distance. That anatomical quirk alone may be one of the single biggest reasons an unarmed, unimpressive primate could realistically threaten a 600-pound cat without ever coming within reach of its claws. Researchers who have studied this joint in detail describe it almost like a slingshot built into the body, storing elastic energy in the tendons and ligaments around the shoulder during the windup and releasing nearly all of it at once during the throw, a mechanism essentially unique among primates, and one that no predator on that entire earlier list had any equivalent version of. That throwing advantage kept improving. Later, hunter-gatherer groups developed the spear thrower, a simple hooked lever that extends the arm's effective length and multiplies both the speed and range of a thrown spear dramatically beyond what an arm alone could ever achieve. Some groups took the idea even further, coating spear tips and arrow points in toxic plant or animal-derived compounds, so that even a shallow, glancing wound from a safe distance could eventually incapacitate an animal too large and too dangerous to finish off directly. None of these predators had any natural defense against a wound that kept working long after the actual weapon had already left a hunter's hand. A creature that could otherwise shrug off a single puncture wound and keep fighting suddenly had to contend with an injury that quietly worsened over the following hour, giving a small group of hunters the option to simply retreat, wait, and return safely once the animal was no longer a threat at all. Ethnographic accounts from hunter-gatherer groups on nearly every continent describe some version of this same trick, whether it involved plant-derived toxins, venom harvested from other animals, or simply letting meat decompose slightly to introduce dangerous bacteria onto a weapon's edge, a level of applied biological knowledge that easily rivaled any physical weapon a predator could grow on its own body. Around 50,000 years ago, something shifted permanently. Humans began spreading out of Africa in serious numbers, into Europe, Asia, Australia, and eventually the Americas. And in region after region, the largest predators on the landscape began disappearing. Scimitar-toothed cats vanished. American lions vanished. Short-faced bears vanished. Woolly mammoths, giant ground sloths, and terror birds all followed the same pattern. There is genuine, ongoing scientific debate over exactly how much of this was driven by human hunting pressure versus a rapidly shifting climate. And the honest answer is probably both, working together. Australia offers one of the starkest examples, where a wave of enormous marsupial predators and giant flightless birds disappeared not long after the first humans arrived on that continent, in an environment that had gone through plenty of earlier climate swings without losing nearly as many large species all at once. The Americas show a strikingly similar pattern only slightly later, once humans crossed into that hemisphere for the first time. But the pattern itself is hard to argue with. On continent after continent, within a few thousand years of humans arriving in serious numbers, the largest predators quietly stopped existing, while many mid-sized and smaller species living alongside those same giants continued on largely undisturbed, which is exactly the signature you would expect if the biggest, slowest reproducing animals were being singled out by a coordinated, tool-using hunter rather than simply losing a random climate lottery. We did not simply survive these animals. We outlasted them, outthought them, and, in the end, effectively removed them from the landscape entirely. Here is the actual explanation underneath all of it. Evolution typically hands each predator exactly one dominant advantage: raw speed, brute strength, size, or camouflage. Evolution handed humans something categorically different: adaptability itself. We could not outrun a short-faced bear, so we learned to strike it from a safe distance instead. We could not outbite a giant hyena, so we surrounded it as a coordinated group instead. We could not see in true darkness the way a cave lion could, so we built fire and effectively turned night into a version of day. Every single physical shortcoming forced us to invent a workaround, and those workarounds accumulated across thousands of generations until our species became something no predator on that original list had any realistic way to evolve fast enough to counter. For roughly 2 million years, we were prey far more often than we were predator. We hid in trees, we froze at unexplained sounds, in the dark. We lost children to leopards and to eagles and had nothing to do but grieve and keep moving. But we carried one advantage no predator on Earth has ever had. We could learn from a mistake once and then make absolutely certain the next generation never had to learn it the hard way. Every fire kept lit, every tracking lesson passed down, every elder cared for instead of abandoned, and every spear thrown from a safe distance was really the same. Underlying strategy applied 1,000 different ways, refusing to solve a problem the same way twice when a better answer was available. Over enough generations, that turned out to be more than enough, and it is the entire reason you are alive to hear the story now.